say first, babe, before I start?
No, I think this little bit here of information is such a wonderful thing as it unfolds. When you get up in the morning, you don't know, but all of a sudden there's something happens, and someone says something. I think it started off this morning when you said that moment in time.
Temple markers.
Yeah,
Temporal markers,
something
yeah.
like giving it a bat in time. The temporal marker comes through and say you've come to that stage, so you've batted a bit further, and all this bloody information starts forming. What do I do that for? And that's what I wrote down this morning, basically. And perpetual motion. 80% of the costs of food or anything is energy, which is controlled by the Rockefellers and Rothschild. So energy is free. So we've got some drawings here that was invented by a Frenchman. Oh, dear me.
1232.
1232. This brilliant Frenchman designed perpetual motion. It was looked at finally by Leonard da Vinci, and it appears that the drawings may have not been built because of the complexity. Recently, however, I looked this morning, and there it is, turning around, a simple little thing that can give you all the energy in the world, and there's your energy problem solved. You just build them weighing 100 tonnes, and they run forever, cost nothing to run. All you need is bearings in it, generator. Storing power is the easiest way of pumping water, be it seawater, onto a mountaintop into a storage tank, and then it bleeds off whenever you need it. So you've got a constant supply from that, and the perpetual motion motor, if you like, can be given a rest, maintenance, whatever. But there's many, many things you can do with it. So we've drawn it out here, and Mary Darling will explain it to you.
I thought I was talking about my 5-year anniversary of the interview with Al, the angel.
Well, that's a good segue.
That's a 180.
This is a 180. I thought that's what this was all about. I started to talk about it. You get the camera.
I forgot.
Oh, yeah, and then you said, is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. Just like get it in now because, you know,
So that's the
Try
prologue.
all right, that's the boring
That's
stuff.
the teaser.
Yeah. Today, the 7th of August in the year
Did you bring the leaves
2007.
in?
Oh, I forgot. See, like you forgot, I forgot.
Would you like the leaves?
He'd like some leaves. What are you going to do with them?
I'm going to put them through the sensitive part of my skin,
Yes.
and also Dexter suggests you put it under your arms because you're trying to take in from that the beauty
Yes.
and the love of that Dex put into it.
Oh, okay. All right. So
And I spat on it.
we'll squish Dex under our armpits and between our toes. Squeeze out his love.
And Joel was in there.
So you're wearing them like those tobacco patches.
Oh, here, give me a go.
Yeah, you want some of that?
Yes, I'll take two. So between
There you go. So we take a little leaf like that. You put it under your arm. And that's a hot area.
Does it deal with BO? Probably does.
Well, you'll end up smelling like him.
Well, it's better than BO. Anyway, back to
Which
5
leads
years
us to
ago.
stomach gas. The extra hemp gas in the methane would drive a small generator.
Okay. Moving right along, back to Al. Al by the name, way in Hebrew means Most High God. So it was this day 5 years ago. I was on Vancouver Island, Sydney, BC, to be precise, staying at Greg's house. The one who thought she was Mary Magdalene was there as well with her young son Benny. And this particular morning, the 7th of August, I was pulled out of the house by my spirit. It was like, go for a walk, go for a walk, go for a walk. So I did. Left the house, didn't know where I was going to go, just started wandering the streets of BC, called into a coffee shop, had a blueberry muffin and a cup of tea. At about 8:40, I left the coffee shop.
Is this a short version?
No, no. The world would only hope.
So there's plenty of room on the camera.
There you go. Joel can shorten it up. Anyway, bottom line is, I begin wandering around some nurseries behind the town. That's appropriate. We've got our horticulturist coming. Karen, oh, that's another odyssey. She's on Adventures of Odyssey, a 54.5-hour bus trip. Having left Adelaide 11 yesterday morning on her way, at about 7 o'clock this morning she was in Canberra. She's been uploading pictures of where they stopped.
Yeah, she just sent one from Sydney about half an hour ago.
Is it about midday? What time is it now?
That's still before midday.
I thought she'd be
about
about
11
midday,
or so.
Okay, that's wonderful. So Karen's going to arrive exhausted, hungry. She had $40 for 3 days of food along the way, and she's arriving hungry, broke, but delighted, having left everything behind in order to reach the kingdom of God, which is wherever the king dwells. Anyway, back to Al. Okay, so I'm wandering around the streets of Sydney, BC, having had my breakfast, etc. I walk down along the seaside. I'm just strolling around aimlessly, really. I cross over to the street. I'm looking at the stores that have all been renovated. They're all very neat and tidy and lovely. And the last store I look at is a liquor shop. What is it? Bottle shop. Liquor store. You know, where they sell alcohol.
Well, they sell German Shepherds.
No. Alcohol. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a lovely storefront. You know, it was cute and quaint and neat and tidy, as everything was in Sydney, BC. And so I'm looking into the window, and as I turn my head to again look at where I was going ahead of me, I lock eyes with two other blue eyes, crystal clear. A man about my height, my colour hair, curly, slight freckles, dressed with a brown leathery looking bomber jacket, white shirt, blue jeans, and he was wheeling a bicycle that had straddled over the back of it two white plastic garbage bags filled with empty glass bottles. They looked like mostly beer. And the impression immediately was he's picked those up out of the garbage, whatever. But as I engage his eyes, we lock like this. And the first words he says to me are, "Do you know what time it is?" Well, immediately, because I never wear a watch, hadn't for years, I'm thinking to myself, it was about 8:40 when I left the company, and in a flash, a half of a nanosecond, I say to him, "It must be about 9 o'clock. And we have this recognition flashing backwards and forwards between our eyes, because I know that 9 is all about the fullness of times. It's almost like an appointed time. So, 9 o'clock. I know immediately I'm having a supernatural encounter. And he knows that I know. So, he leads the conversation and he starts talking about, those bottles only took me an hour to retrieve from garbage or wherever he picked it up, but I'm going to take them to the local recycling and that'll be about $40 there. So I continue to talk about gold in garbage, because my life experience and everything that I've been through to that point, I was thinking about the vitrification of household garbage. It's a problem all around the planet, and yet it can be vitrified and turned into glass, building materials and roads and houses and skyscrapers. So all of this so this conversation began in the street as people are walking around us and we're completely oblivious to it. Must have been standing there 20 minutes as he's leading the conversation, I'm joining with. And finally I said, would you like to continue this down beside the water? There's a bench down there. So okay, he wheels down his bicycle and we sit on a park bench. Now, I was looking for the Christ on the earth at that time. I'd been looking for the Christ on the earth, the man, since 1999, and I was very aware that I could run into him at any point in time, so I was very awake and alert. Anybody who said anything to me, then I would ponder the things that they would say, because I regarded them as blues clues along the journey of finding the Christ on the earth. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I just knew that what was happening was a supernatural encounter and I'd better pay attention. Isn't that what it said this morning? I just said to you, came out 3282, pay attention.
Yeah.
Yes. Heed, pay heed, take heed, pay attention. Something like, that's yes. So, I got to throw in there about this. This morning I woke up, and as you boys know, on Friday I had my hair cut, right? Everything was even, would you say? Like nothing was lopsided? Okay, I go to the mirror this morning, and I look at it and I go, oh my God, the left side looked like it was about that much longer than the right side. So I'm measuring, and it was, I'm going, hello! 3-day-old haircut, and already the left side says, so I know that something is going on. So when I come downstairs and do some checking, and 3282, pay attention, or whatever it was, take heed, which is paying attention. So here we go. I knew I had to pay attention, take heed to everything that Al, the angel, was telling me. So we had this wonderful conversation. It was an exchange. He began to tell me his life story. You know, when angels always have a story, you know, their life story. It's always designed to give you a message and lead you. Now, why it prompted me is because we were talking about John Lennon. And Catherine, if you end up watching this, I read something that you sent to Sherry about you being convinced that Scott is John Lennon. And it sounds like he is. Now, Dex then said, well, wasn't he into, you know, some of this Aleister Crowley stuff and all this satanic stuff? And it prompted me because part of the story of Al, now I knew that the conversation with Al, he was watching my judgment. The things that he was telling me, he was looking at how I would react. Would I judge? So he led me through the conversation, and part of it was that in his part of his life experience, he was up in Kelowna. Now, Brian, of course, knows where they're just outside of Kelowna, having, on his bicycle, travelled there. You know, it's about 500 miles away from where we were, but on his bicycle. He was in Kelowna. He'd actually witnessed a native boy throw himself off a bridge to commit suicide in front of him. He tried to stop him and he couldn't. Anyway, he was sitting down on another park bench, recovering from what he just saw, and he was interviewed by police and all kinds of things. So he was sitting there recovering when out of a tavern came who he recognised to be the lead singer of the Eagles.
Oh,
right? The Eagles. The Eagles. Oh, are you that young that you don't? The Eagles.
Hotel California.
Now again, all of this, you know, music that's been hijacked by Satan and all the rest of it. And what they're supposed to sing about? Oh, did they sing "Stairway to Heaven" or something?
No, that was Led Zeppelin.
No, Led Zeppelin, but Hotel California, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, Al begins this story of his encounter with who he recognises to be the lead singer of the Eagles. And so he talks about how he came out, and of course he's much older now and he doesn't have any hair. So he says, you know, he's a bald eagle, you know, a bit of a joke, and I'm laughing. And then, so his story was about, and then as he was talking to the lead singer and how now that they'd left all of that behind and they were quite prosperous in other, you know, property developments, written books, things like that. And then as he was talking to him, some of the other former band members came out to join him. So it was like this gathering of the Eagles. Yeah. Okay? Now I'm thinking prophetically and scripturally, because there's a scripture about where the eagles gather.
Right.
There is the carcass. So it's this gathering of, and he's knowing what I'm thinking. So I'm in humour quoting the scriptures to him as he's leading in this story, because we were going through the scriptures as a story. You know, it was the most amazing thing. But he said to me, and this is the whole point of it, because we were talking about John Lennon and what he may have done in his first, in that life, and if he's back now in this man. And Al just said to me, you know, they used to do that, but it's like they grew up and they left that all behind.
Right.
And it was, the lesson was, that's what life is about.
Well, as I said, they probably like tried all these different things.
Well, exactly.
They went to India and then
yes.
They tried in.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know,
but as we've been like the reincarnations of the soul is about getting it right.
Yeah, it's 7 times silver.
That's right. So in each incarnation, they would come a bit further. So now, example, John Lennon was cut short. He was cut down. Okay, so if he's backing this man Scott, who is obviously not doing any of that because he's involved with Catherine and this kind of thing, and knowing who he is but not making a big deal about it, he's just living his life, having learned
the
from
lesson.
The lesson, if you like. Much like Marilyn in Sherry. She learned from that. She's back immediately to fulfill the maturity, growing up into the maturity of who she is, her soul, which of course is what Yah and all of us have accomplished today. It just took 2 times for us. We've got to get through, that's what it's all about. So, and it was all about the judgment. What was I going to judge? Because, I knew some of the horror stuff that they're supposed to be involved in, yet again, with Al, I didn't. Okay, all right. So he led me through all of these situations, looking for my judgment. At one point there was like this, they had to cull these wild pigs and things in New Zealand, all this kind of thing, and looking for my judgment. I go, oh, okay, all right, because I understood the necessity of it and this kind of thing. So we go through this, and then just another example in that there were 2 parts to this, was that while we're sitting there, he says, oh, geez, I don't have any cigarettes left. And so he gets up and he stops somebody, and they just happen to have a cigarette, and Al gives him $1. Well, I go diving in my pocket, I've got $5. Oh, do you want to get 5 more? This is from the passerby. He says, no, it's all right. He says, it's all right. No, it's okay, it's all right. That's awesome. Oh, shading the camera.
Yeah, it's really hot.
It is very hot. Oh, it's like that perpetual motion machine that you're talking about. Oh. Anyway, so this was...
Yeah, that one at the top there. One more.
Alright, I'll get one more.
I can't make sure it don't.
Yeah, we're still rolling.
Okay, still rolling, all right. So this was the beginning of my encounter. Now, the encounter actually lasted 3 hours in total, and it split into 2 parts. So he gave me information about the Christ, of course, because at one point, as we're going through this marvellous, and I call it off-the-wall conversation as he's leading me, he was the one that told me the makings of a good novel, what will sell, that is humour, poignancy and grittiness. Those 3 elements make a good story that will sell. And because he was writing his own life story, that was part of his story. So we also discussed the woman that I was involved in at the time who had given me these 2 mines to sell. She'd placed them in my hands, trusting me as the only person on the earth that she could trust to sell these mines and this kind of thing.
That's
so
right, yeah.
He talked to me about platinum. It's a catalytic converter, of course, and used in all motors, cars, computers, everything, and all of these kinds of things. That also he'd been instrumental in getting the ball rolling for this funding of
billions of dollars, wasn't it? Tens of billions.
Well, I mean, at this time he was talking about the house of couple of houses for homeless people and drug users down in Victoria that he'd been instrumental in raising the money for, and he did it because again he biked all the way to Alberta, in Calgary, Alberta, and he said there that all of the wealthy people of Calgary, having made their money through or whatever, out of gratitude for they got together and they raised enough money to build, I think it was 2 buildings where they housed all of the homeless. And it was a program where the homeless and the drug users, they could live there.
Get themselves on their feet. Yeah,
well, not only that, but they had to partake in the community to keep the buildings maintained, clean. In other words, not just being there for a free
learn
ride.
how to be janitors and
That's
electricians.
right, to repay and make it work.
And
so the homeless community had gone down to practically zero at that time in Calgary. And so Al was there to witness this, and they had this thermometer thing on the wall where they're at, and everything they did to raise this money. And so what he did was that he took a photograph of it all and wrote the story out, and then mailed it back to his friend, this Reverend, I forget his name, Reverend, to deal with the drug and homeless situation in Victoria.
Right.
And so they implemented the program, and they were they were able to buy one building. They raised $14 million to buy one building, and then they were able to do the same program to buy another building and replicate the
Can you
program.
imagine that could be done so easy in
Oh.
every single town? So there's enough philanthropy.
Absolutely.
In every single area.
That's right. So anyway, now Al just said to me, he said, and he likened it like this: all I did was I picked up a handful of snow, I packed it together, and I released it. And so he got the ball rolling, and as it did, of course, it got bigger and bigger and bigger in momentum, of course, until, the result is. So this was all part of I knew I was being interviewed. So at one point I said, well, I was talking about my friends who I was staying with, would you like to come home and meet them? He says, sure. This is where it gets interesting. Now, we'd already talked about drugs and alcohol. He talked about the ingredients that are beneficial in a beer, and it was his beverage of choice because he cycled about 20 miles every day, and he drank, that's right, before we went down to sit, he went into the liquor store and bought a tinny of beer, a bigger, about that size, a long, tall, skinny thing. And he had a few sips out of it and was just kind of sitting on it. And again, he's looking for Mike, because it was only 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm going, okay. And so we discussed the benefits, the hops and the barley and the malt and all this kind of thing that goes into beer making, and that he worked it off as he cycled around 20 miles a day to work it off. And then he goes on to discuss spirits. He said, I would never touch spirits. They are truly, evil, and this is what they do to the body and this kind of thing, so I'd never touch spirits. Also, we talked about drug use and this kind of thing. That's something he'd never ever done, drugs. So, he's given me the story. And at one point, now he knows that I'm on high alert, paying attention for any clue, because I'm looking for the Christ on the earth. And part of his story was that, my mother was born in Australia, he says. I'm sitting this side of him, and he's sitting, my mother was born in Australia. And you can imagine me, I'm sitting there going, tick, 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 mother born in Australia, and he looks this way, looks away, like this. I just, great big clanger, seed. Tick, 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 tick. I said to him, really? She was born in Australia? Where? Is she still alive to ask? And he says, no. Like this, in Australia. All things pertaining to the prize. Here I am sitting in BC. No. And so, that was the seed. So we move on from there. I say, do you want to come home and meet my friends? Now, of course, the one thought she was Mary Magdalene. It was all about her. And that's why I was in her life, because the script was being written, Mary Magdalene believing she was Mary Magdalene, and Jesus was going to find her, and they would be husband and wife, and he was going to rescue her and all the rest of it. And he was coming for her, and it was all about her. So she was very demonstrative, demanding, childish, and now I know, completely mentally unbalanced. However, again, I didn't judge it, because I knew I was required to be in her life as the sounding board. And as it turned out, all the information that gave us the clues to move along, if you like, in our search for the Christ on the earth. We were the only two. Greg knew we were looking as well. He also. So there were only 3 of us on the earth looking for the Christ, the man on the earth. And so also Greg, whose place we were staying at, we arrived in Victoria on the ferry. On the Saturday, Greg was in town. We didn't tell him what ferry we were coming from. Greg, who'd been used to seeing angels many times throughout his life, he locked eyes with a man sitting on the street curb, the other side of the road, while he was in Sydney. And as they lock eyes, he knew that the angel was communicating telepathically with him, saying, you better get home, they'll be here in a few minutes. So Greg goes home immediately. 10 minutes later, we arrive. And also, all right, we go back to make our way back to Greg's place. Now, the tinny that Al had taken a few sips out of, he actually put in the sleeve of his jacket, like the bottom down here at the wrist. And so he's pedaling the bike and going like this, holding on to hold this upright.
The already open tinny.
The already open tinny. Now, I'd asked him, I said...
He one of them hats.
He'd been homeless for 40 years, and I'd said to him incredulously, has nobody offered you a bed in 40 years? And he said no, and immediately the scripture, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And I say that, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So, no. And he says no. So as we're walking along, of course the beer spills all down his left side. As a matter of fact, it's probably wild. The left side, all over his jeans. And I'm immediately thinking, oh my God, this is a setup. He's going to walk in the house smelling like beer. I wonder what the other two will do, knowing exactly what they would do. These are the thoughts. And he puts on this little plate. Oh my goodness, look at that. What about, he says, I hate being dirty. We'd already discussed what he does. When his clothes get dirty, because he didn't have a backpack full of clothes. And I asked him, I said, what do you do? Do you go to the Vinnies? He says, yeah, I go and buy new, $3 for
That's right, they do his laundry,
and leave the old ones rather than do the laundry. It's cheaper to go. He says every few days. He says, I hate being dirty.
Awesome.
Anyway, so now this is the freaky part. We're walking back to a set of lights, and I'd told him where Greg's house was, and he says, oh well, that's where I'll go and cash in my bottles, because the recycling place is just around the corner, from Greg's place. Well, Greg lived in a bloody urban, Anyway, I'll go, yeah, right, okay. He says, I'll meet you back at the house. So I continue to walk on, and Al stopped at the lights to cross over, and, okay, I'll meet you back at the house. I probably walked 5 paces, no more. And then I've turned around to see Al's progress. Well, Al was gone. Now, if the lights had changed, he should have been no more than in the middle of the road crossing over. No, Al's not there. So now, okay, I'm looking around for Al. So I find Al. I'm here on this side of the street. I see Al actually ahead of me on the other side of the street. But he's cycling, but so slow he's wobbling, like he might fall over. It's so slow. The setup. And I'm going, yeah, right. So I walk home to Greg's house. And there's Diana. She's all, huffy and puffy. And, of course, Benny's still sick. He'd had a high fever for 2 days. And we were actually going to leave that day. But the day before, the engineers of the ferry went out on strike. I've been through this before. That suddenly call a strike, no ferries running, so we can't leave that day. I get home and we're in the kitchen, and I'm saying, guys, look, I met this, he's coming to me, and all the rest of it, and starting to tell. And then Greg says, Janelle, stop, look, I've got to tell you something, because Greg had left the house before I did to go and put gas in his car, petrol in his car. He says, while I was at the gas station, now what I'm about to say happens to Greg a lot, so it was just normal for Greg. He says, I was pumping gas in the car, and he says, I felt my body go into a slump. So he, leaning against his car, he goes into this slump. And then when he comes out of the slump and opens his eyes, he said, I see a 9-foot angel, blonde hair, blue eyes. He was huge. And then he talks about this car, like a pickup, a Ford pickup. We call it a utility here.
Yeah.
And it had this writing over that was connected with a marina down at the end of the place. This emerald marina or whatever, something like that. But this 9-foot angel standing there, blonde, blue eyes, huge. And he says to Greg, he says to tell Janelle, give Janelle this message. And the message was, are you ready for the adventure of your lifetime? And to remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. And then there was, and so Diane's listening to this, and she's going, well, what's there for me? Is there a message for me? And he also said to tell Diane that I have saved the last dance for her. So he tells us this, and I'm going, well, it's already happened. Oh, it's already started, it's going to be. And Diane's going, the last dance for me, like that song, the last dance. What, the last dance? I'll have the last dance, whatever. So she's all excited about the last dance, and and I go, well, it's already started. He's going to be here very soon. Anyway, so Benny, what is that? Now, bear in mind, Greg had built this beautiful patio and garden area. He'd turned his house into a garden because he believed that one day the Lord Jesus Christ, who we were looking for, would come and be in that, he would be in that garden and we would feed him in that garden. That was the motivation for him building that garden.
Did Yahweh ever go there?
No. Now, bear in mind, it's Vancouver Island, so he spent years on Vancouver Island. And Greg knew that the coming of the Lord had to do with Vancouver Island. Like Vancouver, I land in Vancouver, the pun on the words. It's always about the play on the words, Vancouver Island. And Greg had seen in a vision him on the island, all kinds of things, which was all true. But we didn't know it at that time. It was an expectation that this could very well happen any instant because we were looking for him. Anyway, so I said, look, he's going to be here any moment. And so Greg takes me out to the garden. And then a knock on the door. Now, for the previous 2 years, at that stage, 2 years that I'd been with Diane, the script was written through me. So much information, because it was all about her. She demanded to know, I want to know, you go and get the information from the Lord, write it out, and it's all about her. And there were all of these terms being used, things like, well, my best man is actually a woman. This is, and you are my right arm, things like that had been written. They were all part of the script, and all this understanding that I gained through this, that came through me writing. I call it dialogue on the heart. Anyway, all this kind of thing. So, the plays on words, the puzzles, the word plays. All these things, so they get you buzzing. I know now it was to occupy me. Because I could have been told his phone number in 1999, but, wasn't time. Okay. And was all about, paying attention to the clues, following the lead too. Al knocks on the door. Greg goes and opens it. I follow Greg. Hi Al, this is Greg, and this is Diane over here, that's Benny on the couch. He's got this, hi. And then Greg shows us out into the garden to sit with Al over the table. And then so Greg kind of sits down, and Greg says, like I know you, I've met you before. Part of the book that Greg and Diane were writing together about their adventures and, looking for the Lord and all this kind of thing was the... about 9 years before, on the island, the two of them were walking home from church, and they met this man who was a peddler, a window washer. Turns out it was Al. So, and I already knew the story because Al went home and washed all of Greg's windows in a nanosecond, and all the time the scriptures were unfolding. So there was this amazing encounter. Now at the time, Diane was locked in the car. She couldn't get out because she knew it was a moment in time for Greg and the angel. But they knew it was an angel. So Greg recognized, and he asks him, are you still washing windows? And Al says, no, I haven't done that for a lot of years, kind of thing. Just... Yeah. So anyway... Now, remember, it's all about a book. Al's writing a book about his story. So, and remember, funny, poignant, and gritty, meaning truthful. Gritty, but gritty could be
good
edgy,
story.
Gritty,
it's got to be
gritty. Yeah. Truth is gritty.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he says to me, and Greg's sitting there, would you like me to read you from my book? So he pulls out this ancient diary. It's just ancient, falling to ancient, and he'd already told me, sitting down by the thing, that one man in the street had listened to his story, and he was so, he loved it. And he was the man who told Al about the three components. And that man had given him a $10 note as a seed for the publishing of Al's story. Well, Al had shown me the $10 note. He'd kept it as, the seed, and kept it, 10, remember 10, Dex, 10, Judgment, 10, So Al starts to read from his, listening and getting into it. It's just what he experienced. But it was also about war, his going off to war and this kind of... Anyway, it ended. It was a short story. It ended with his friend who ended up getting through war, a bullet right between the eyes. And it left you shocked, the ending. It's abrupt. Of course, it was awful. And I'm going, oh my God, that's awful. That's so sad. And I'm looking at Al, and we're exchanging glances, and he's crying. And I'm going, oh my God, because this was his friend. And there was nothing more to be said. No discussion. That was the story. And I could feel Greg getting uncomfortable, like antsy. So he reads another story, equally as gritty. You know, I forget the content of that, but it was gritty. It was like, oh, you know, and I'm emoting with it and being there, and oh my God. And Greg's getting more and more uncomfortable, you know. So he says, well, I'm going to get up and make some lunch, because Greg was actually looking after his elderly father at the time, and then Diana hasn't come out at all this time. She's just looking after Benny, who's still on the couch with him, all this kind of thing. So anyway, this is going down. So once Greg leaves, that's when Al says to me, you know, we've heard 2 stories. He said, would you like to hear another one? I go, oh, yeah. So he reads this beautiful story. Oh my God. And he read another beautiful story. But it finished with this highway. He's on this highway, he's on this road, and in the distance he sees the Lord who had come to take him, Al, home. And I'm looking at it, and now I'm crying. I'm going, oh my God, he's crying. And he just looks at me, this exchange going on between the eyes. I'm going, oh my God, that's beautiful. We're emoting and crying between each other. Greg comes out by this time. Oh, no, the other significant thing about this timing, remember it's all about the time, and the clues I'd already had. At one point, Greg asked me, could I go in and do something, but would I note the time on the TV, the digital clock? I went in, to see it, that's right. I said, look, I'm just going to go in and see how Benny's doing and Diane. And Greg says to me, do you know, while you're in there, can you note the time on the clock? He has to feed his dad. I guess he was thinking about lunchtime. So I go in and I look at the clock, and it was 11:50. It was, I've got it wrong. No, at that point, it was 10 minutes past 12 noon, 10 minutes past midday. And I've looked at it and I've judged the time, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he must have knocked on the door at midday, high noon. Now, part of the written record that I was getting was about the significance of high noon. Like, I'll be there at high noon. Just cryptic stuff. It was a joke about high noon. OK, Corral, showdown at high noon, stuff like that. OK, so I'm in my head, I'm going, oh my God, Al knocked on the door at about high noon. So I go back out, and at that point I say to Greg, it's 10 after 12. So then he starts fussing over lunch and all the rest of it all the time, thinking high noon, the knock on the door. Oh, remember I said to you a couple of days ago, you boys, about I heard in my spirit the gunshot?
Yeah.
Well, I was about to tell you about this instance because I think it was the day before that Diana, the one who thinks she's Mary, woken up. She hears this knock on the door in her spirit. And she comes out and she said, did anybody else hear that knock at the door in their spirit? Why am I the only one who heard it? Blah, 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 and this kind of thing. Well, of course, there's the scripture in the Revelation about I stand at the door and knock. If any man opens the door, I'll come in and I will dine with them. So what was happening? She hears it. Why hasn't anybody else heard it? Am I the only one who hears these things like this? Well, this is the very next day, right? So what's happened? At midday, high noon, there's been a knock at the door, and in walks Al, which is Hebrew for the Most High. Al, the angel, Hebrew for the Most High God, sitting down at lunchtime. Right? Greg's busy to make lunch and all the rest. So what happens? Oh, we're just having this emotional fest between each other, eye contact and tears over Al's beautiful stories and Jesus and the Lord and the highway and taking him home and all this kind of thing. Greg comes out and he's made sandwiches and packed them in a lunch bag for Al and says, here you are, Al, I've made some sandwiches for you to take with you. to take with you. So what's he doing? Backdooring, asking Al to leave, to take with you. He could have brought out a tray of sandwiches to have while we're all sitting there.
Yeah.
No, he packed a lunch, but with it was an apple, okay? So immediately I want everybody to think of Garden of Eden, the apple, blah, blah, blah. So now I'm seeing this and I'm interpreting every action, every word. I'm taking heed what's going down, tick, 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 tick in my mind. Al's knowing exactly what I'm thinking. So Al, so casually, sitting back there, he says, oh, thanks for the sandwich, Greg. And he pulls that over towards me. He says, I'll enjoy that later. He says, as for the apple, no thanks. And he pushes it aside like that. And then he looks at Greg and he says, I've picked up enough apples to last 2 lifetimes. You know, talk about the sin in the Garden of Eden and all the rest of it, Adam's fault, you know. Oh. Okay, 2 lifetimes. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about 1 and 2.
Listening.
Anyway, moving right along. So it quickly from there. So I'm thinking. Now, Greg then asks Al about the window washing. Would Greg, no, he's thinking like he needs to earn some money perhaps, so would he like to come back and wash Greg's windows again? And Al looks at him and says, all right, Greg. Now, there's another scripture here about the eyes being the window to the soul, right? So think prophetically and scripturally. So, and I know this, and so Greg's fallen right in. Would you like to come back and wash my windows, Al? And Al looks at him and says, all right, Greg, I could do that for you. He says, would you like me to wash outside and inside this time? Oh, I'm dying here. I'm going, oh my God. It's all going over like 747 Greg's head. And Greg says, yes, all right, that would be good. And then Greg says to him, well, how much would you charge for that? So now Al's considering. Now think scripturally. He says, He says, how about $30? I'm going, oh my God, 30 pieces of silver. Betrayal. 30 pieces of silver. Greg goes, okay, that sounds fair. All right, when would you like it to? And Greg says, well, not so. He says, how about towards the end of the week? Like this was, I don't know what day it was, but how about towards the end of the week? Al says, okay, I'll come and I'll wash your windows inside and outside at the end of the week for $30. Okay. So now it's obvious that it's time to break up our love fest because, Greg's feeling uncomfortable. Al stands up. Oh, that's right. Before he stands up, he leans across the table and he shakes my hand like this. He extends his hand to shake it. But he doesn't grab my hand. He grabs above my wrist to grab onto the arm.
Like the old Roman type.
Is that it? Oh, okay.
Like,
The arm.
Like that,
Yeah, okay, so he takes and he holds onto it and he's looking at me and he's crying. He says, I am so very glad to have met you. And then he looks at me and he says, you are my right arm. And I'm looking at him going, oh my God, I know that. That's the information that's like, no. Like in the looking for the Lord on the earth, what it was that I'd be the one to get things done. Right, I would do the work, I'd organise, because that's the position that I was always in. I was of no importance other than I'd be the one to, organise things, get it done.
Administrate,
facilitate, all the rest of it, just do. The gopher, like I was in Diane's life.
It's an important role, like...
Totally. Well, it's also, carries no title. That's what I was in Diana's life. And that's what I was in my other friend Joyce, she's known around the world now as an evangelist, and I was her gopher, and I was pleased to be in that position. Just thought they're way more important than me. Just got to get things done, get the job done, kind of thing. So when I found the Christ, of course, it would be the same admin, get the job done. Just got to be about the work of the Father, all this kind of thing. So Al stands up to leave. Now he walks over and he kind of hesitates just for an instant. Well, in that instant, Diane comes out of the kitchen, and now she's not been paying any attention at all to Al. Doesn't want to know because it doesn't involve her basically. And Al just says to her, he says, "What's wrong with your boy, your son? What's wrong with him?" And she says, "Oh, well, he's had a fever for the last couple of days, and really high fever the last couple of days, and she's already agitated, and doesn't want to talk to him." And Al says to her, he says, "Look, if his fever goes up, take him to the hospital." Wow.
She didn't want to be told what to do.
Totally. She threw her arms up and she starts shaking like this. She's going, Pentecostal people do this a lot. This is the shaking, because in her world she's now filled with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And she called him, she said, "You have a problem with anger." She said, and she says, "You're a drunkard and a drug addict," like this. Well, Al looks at her and says, "I have a problem with anger." And now I'm watching these and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the angel of the Lord.
You know what?
He turns around and he just connects with me, you see what it is that you're dealing with. That's all. That's the connection, the recognition. And she commands him to get out of there. And he looks and says, "Don't worry, I'm going." Now, it was interesting. Remember, the words to her were, "I've saved the last dance for you." Now, when she throws her arms up like this, and she's kind of hopping around, and Al does this from one foot to the other foot, like this. Now, in boxing, they call boxing dancing.
Sparring, yeah.
Like this that's what, around the ring.
Yeah.
That's what it is, this dance between one foot and the other.
Mm.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I've saved the last dance for you. Meaning this is it. This is the end. And so he leaves, and Diane is now angry. "Did you smell that all over here?" We go in the kitchen, and she's going, and now she's ripping into me about being deceived by this demon, and Benny was saying it was a demon and all this stuff. And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, so I do what she does. So I drop to my knees and I throw my arms up, and I'm looking at her and I say, something like, I say, "Deliver me from all deception," as I'm looking at her, right? So now she wants me to go and get something from Benny, and I'm like, I've got to get out of here. My car was locked in, I couldn't drive. So I grabbed my handbag and I'm thinking, just got to get out. I'll go to the supermarket and get peanut butter for Benny. It was a sunny day like this. When I left the house, or actually as soon as she threw him out of the garden, now we're talking about Eden here, parallels, all this kind of thing. The weather changed, it dropped probably 10 degrees at least. It turned grey and a cold wind started to blow. I was shivering. I walked out and I'm just shivering with the cold about the enormity of what would happen. Oh my God, now things went down to hell level. This was so horrible, awful. What she had done was she had evicted the angel of the Lord. We're talking about God here, I cross over at the lights and I'm standing in the middle waiting for the lights to change on that side. And I turn around and there's Al. He's just suddenly there with his bike and he wheels up onto the thing. And I'm shaking like this. And he says to me, some people should never be parents. And I start to say, oh, that's right, because she had gone on about her belief in prayer. Well, I'm a praying woman and my God will heal, blah, 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 like that. And then Al said some people should never be parents. And then I said, look, to be fair, I do believe in the power of prayer and we do pray. And I called her Diane then, I like Diane, do believe in the power of prayer, this kind of thing. And then he said something about doctors. You know, doctors are there for cases like this. And he just said to me, he said, if the boy's temperature goes up, take him to the hospital. And I said, I will. And then he said, I trust your word over hers. And then he said, what was her name? And I said, Diane. And that's when he said to me, he said, he turned his head again, he says, I don't know her. Now, there's a scripture. For all of you Christians who might be listening to this, Jesus speaking, in that day, you will say to me, Lord, Lord, did I not heal the sick? Did I not raise the dead? And I will say to you, depart from me, for I never knew you. So by Al saying that to me about I don't know her, I knew, oh my God. And that's, the enormity of that was overwhelming for me. And then he says to me, he called me gazelle. Now again, you know, he says gazelle, and I laughed. Because it talks about a gazelle and the hinds feet of the gazelle, and again, it's symbolic. And he knew it was Janelle, but he was knowing that I'd get it kind of thing. He just, he said to me, as he was getting on my bike, he said, I will see you again. And then he just rode off and like vanished. You know, he rides off, I turn around and look for him, and of course he's gone. So I go to the supermarket and I'm freezing, I'm shivering, I'm so cold, the weather had changed, it was hell freezing over. And I'm looking for the peanut butter, and I rode around 10 minutes before I could focus on finding the peanut butter, the enormity of what she had done. So bottom line is, go back, don't say anything, just get through it now. It's like, let's get out of here. As it turned out, they were talking about the demons that came in with him and all this kind of shit carrying on, and oh my God. The next morning the ferries were back running. I said to Diane, I said her before we got on, I said, if Benny hasn't improved, we're going straight to the BC Children's Hospital when we get off the ferry. So that's what we did. I just drove straight there. They treated him. Got back home to Diane's place, and now I felt like a prisoner. And I wrote out this lamentation. And it was pages and pages of this lamentation that was on my heart, this condemnation and this lamentation. And it was like I had to get it out. But I knew it wasn't me. This lamentation was from God himself, what had taken place. And, you know, this is just representative of the world, if you like. So I wrote it all out like this. And the last thing I said was, Lord, just heal Benny. Just heal him. And then I said, thank you for getting me out of here. Okay, Benny woke up next morning. He was fine. Just all gone. Fever down, gone. He was fine. Now, as it turned out, I actually tried to get out. I tried to leave the house early that morning just to get out. And I got as far as Abbotsford, which means farther crossing over, that Eagle Mountain that I was telling you. And I realised that I went to make a phone call back to Diana, and it wasn't letting me. It was telling me, error, error, error. And I knew the angels were saying to me, look, you know, you're making a mistake. So a deep breath. I just spent about an hour or so away from there, and then I go, okay, go back to what had now become the prison. And as it turned out, this was on the Friday, this was all happening. As it turned out, I get a message that, now this is at the time where the Roman murdered him, the one who shoved the spear in his side, because I haven't found him, this is all on the way. He had been trying to get a flight to come over and join me, because I was only supposed to be gone 4 weeks, and now I was going to be gone 8 weeks. He tried twice before, only using his flybys to pay for it. Not going to pay any money, but he had enough flybys. Okay, twice before, spent an hour each time, no flights, no flights. I didn't know this, but this is what is told after. On that Friday, he phones again, third time. Spends 45 minutes, nothing. They're about to say goodbye. I'm sorry, I can't help you. When suddenly, a flight to Canada comes available. And even more miraculous, the woman's going, oh my God, don't go away, wait on, I've got your seat. I can get you there on the 14th, right? Of days away. then she says, oh my God, and I can get you back. You know, a day after my flight back in September. This is amazing. So she booked like that, all using flybys. So suddenly he's there, the rescue. Remember I said deliver me from all deception? So now I don't have to remain there in the prison.
You're out.
We're out. So that was that part of the DVD. And of course, it, you know, got back to Australia. She was actually coming back with me. That was all part of the DVD and all the rest of it. That was all organised. So what happened, when it came time to leave in September, Benny comes with me on the flight. We go via Hong Kong. We arrive, she arrives a couple of days later, and then we're at the place at 2 Tulip Close, which I had only just organised before I left on the trip. Thinking, oh God, I've got to have somewhere to bring Diane back to. And there 1 week, Adam's living with us. Now Adam, you know, he went in and out of these dark places, but always intuitive. Now he'd had a problem with Mary all along. He'd actually sent me a desperate message. He says, Mum, I've been shown, you know, what she is and all the rest of it. And I'm going, okay, all right, I know. I've got to let this thing play out. Well, she lasted about 7 days, and her attitude and just, you know, hoarding food, eating it in the bedroom, demanding this, demanding that, you know.
You're going to get frizzled, aren't you, darling?
What's that, babe? Oh, probably. Anyway, what happened was a showdown between Adam and Mary when Adam evicts Mary. She makes a phone call. Somebody she had befriended comes to get her and takes her away. She stole some CDs that I'd had. I found them in her luggage. I actually took them out, realising she was intending to steal them. She discovered that and got them back anyway to steal them. And she left. And then she left the country a few days later. So as it was all this, as she evicted Al, the Most High, from the garden, so she was evicted from Australia, which of course is where the Christ was and is. So she was evicted out of the garden, if you like. So that was that part, and that was the end of her in my life as Mary. There were a couple of times when I did call again. I was prompted to call information. What would happen every time that we connected? Michael would come forward with information. All the time she thought it was for her, when no, it was for me. And at this point in time, when it was done and dusted, it was all about...
You're going to get sunburned.
Okay, I probably am. Yes. It was all about, these things can be true in a person. This is why I talk about the rabbit holes and these things being true in people's lives, because they do experience these things being, it's true, it happened in their lives. However, it is not the truth. And if it is not the truth, based on the knowledge that the Christ is already here, his name is Brian Leonard Golightly Marshall, he's living in Australia, and everything that he tells you, then everything else will fall away. It is a rabbit hole. And the Christian rabbit hole, in my mind, is probably the deepest, the longest, and the darkest of all of them. Because they have been getting information to affirm their own belief and understanding, and have not been humble enough to lay it all down and realize that nobody can comprehend the mind of God, and he can do what he damn well pleases. He can also change the script when he's on the earth to judge everything. He can change the script anytime he wants to. So that's today. That was my encounter with Al.
Angelic anniversary.
Today. Pardon?
It's the angelic anniversary.
It's the angelic anniversary, absolutely. And so the word this morning was, what was it? Take heed, pay attention.
Was it, how many days was it?
What it was, I went and checked on your computer what had gone down bank accounts this morning, and I'm looking at the amount deposited, thinking, okay, doesn't have to be that amount, but just today it is, which was you know, all to do with Asherah. And then the balance that was left, and my eyes are stuck on it, thinking, okay, I'll go and look it up. Well, it's the balance that was left after payments gone out. That's the pay attention, take heed.
Bunnings, umbrella.
Yeah.
Gazebo. Well, they're $250.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're not-
Tent like, yes, that's what we need. Something like that, that would be good.
That big square one. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So, anyway, that's another part of the DVD. It's all very exciting. But it was still 7 months before again.
This is
And it was Al.
pre JCDC part of the
Well,
DVD.
no, JCDC had already happened. This was in between. That was over. This was in between. And as it turned out, a man called Al sent the video link to David Clues, DC, who was living back in Sydney. He phoned and said on Adam's 17th birthday, so March the 30th, 2008, he said, oh my God, there's a man in Melbourne who's saying he's God. Go and have a look. And of course, so, that's Al, the angels, how they operate. And,
I was surprised that worked earlier. God.
well, like I said, they could have
I'm
told me.
lobbing holy hand grenades over the fence all the time, nothing's happening.
Well, totally. But the year I came out of the church, it was August the 14th, 1999. They could have told me then. They could have given me your Melbourne phone number and said, he's in Melbourne, here's the phone number, go and call him. But you had only 2 years with Mary Magdalene. So you still had to suffer more, babe. 13.13 years had to be with
No, that was all to do with getting Alaska.
Yes.
His birthday is on the 11th.
Yeah,
And Trinity.
that's right. That's right. So it was all good. It was all part of it.
Now, the
haven't-
parents don't recognise it, but doesn't matter to me. The children will when they get older.
No.
They can't be poisoned now because I had them for the first 7 years of your life.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Raise up a child until he's 7 years. May go away, but they'll come back.